Now is the perfect time to build your AI-enabled data analytics skill set. And I'm going to show you exactly how you can get started 100% free with tools that are actually useful and used in work. The old way of doing data analytics work, manually writing every SQL query, tediously building a report, that is becoming less and less relevant as we move into an AI-enabled world. Whether you are a complete beginner looking to break into data, or you are an experienced data professional looking to add AI to your existing skill set, you'll find this video valuable. And here is the important part. Everything we use today is completely free. No matter what you are willing to spend, you can follow every step in this demo on your computer and start your data and AI journey today. I'm going to walk through this video as if I were someone who has nothing set up. So you'll get a clear step-by-step guide starting from zero. Now let's take our first step and install a free AI coding agent. The first step we're going to do here is install OpenCode. And if you have not heard of OpenCode, it is a free open source AI coding agent that runs in your terminal. And now it has its own desktop app. It can write code, run different commands, and ultimately help you build and execute different projects. It has over 100,000 stars on GitHub, so this has been one of the most popular open source AI coding agents. There are two ways that you can download OpenCode, either via their new desktop app or in your terminal. I will first show you the desktop app, where if I click the download and then go download for Mac OS. I am running this whole process on my Mac. So for the Windows users, I will include instructions in the appropriate documentation. Now with OpenCode downloaded, I will click my download history. I'll go over here to screen, drag OpenCode into my applications, search for it. And now we have OpenCode successfully downloaded. Now, to go to the other way of doing this, you can also get it via your terminal per this command. Now, what's the difference between downloading it in your terminal versus the desktop app? Really, it is a preference of how you want to interact with OpenCode, but there's no fundamental difference in how you're going to be interacting with the AI agent. It is just a different user interface. To install via terminal, I will copy this command, and this command will work across both Windows and Mac. Open up terminal or command prompt if you're on Windows. Paste that command, click enter, and then what it will do is it will install OpenCode in my terminal. And once you see this message here, we know it's been successfully installed. Now with OpenCode in my terminal, my preferred way of interacting with it in this manner is through an IDE, or Integrated Development Environment, which is essentially a piece of software designed to help you edit code and organize projects based around code. I have a few different options that you can download here on my web browser, where there's Kiro, which is from Amazon, I believe, Visual Studio Code, which is Microsoft, and then Cursor and Windsurf, which are both AI forward IDEs with their own agents available inside of these pieces of software. I actually have a previous video that compares Cursor agents to Claude Code, and I don't have anything where I've utilized Windsurf, so I'm going to utilize Windsurf for this demo. However, what you'll find with these IDEs, specifically the AI forward ones, and now even with Visual Studio Code, and Kiro is AI forward as well, they all are very similar in how they work in terms of giving you options to interact with agents that will execute code for you and build code for you and help you work on that data work that you want to get done. Up to you which one you choose. All of them are good options. I haven't found a tremendous amount of difference in my use of all of these different tools. Now I have Windsurf downloaded, and I'm going to get started with this tool utilizing the key bindings from VS Code. I'm going to use the default settings, go with dark mode, and I am going to sign up here. After signing up for Windsurf, I was taken to this screen, and the first thing I'm going to do is open a new terminal, and I will type in OpenCode. And this will actually launch OpenCode inside of my terminal, inside of my IDE. And the reason I do this, as you'll see later in the video, is you will be able to see all of the folders and files that your coding agent has created in this left-hand tab. So it makes for a very seamless interface for you to understand what has been changed, what has been built, what has been deleted in accordance with the Git structure. Now, to continue with the setup here for OpenCode, I'm actually going to go over into the application that we downloaded just to experience this interface a little bit, and I find it a little bit easier for setup as well. And if I click this \, this is actually my root directory where OpenCode exists, not integrated into a specific project that I'm working on. And now I can see the models that are available to me immediately after downloading this, where I have Big Pickle, Nemo, Minimax, Nemotron, some of my favorite model names. And I can ask these agents questions like what directory are you in, and it will answer that and show that I am in my root directory. Now, one of the really nice features about OpenCode is that you can actually connect more models, even ones you pay for if you want to. So you can switch amongst these different providers of these AI models. So for me, what I'm going to show you is a way to get even more free models loaded into OpenCode. Now, if I go to openrouter.ai, this is a service that allows you to utilize multiple other free models. And we can see here in the interface that there is a free tier that we are going to utilize. So I'm going to click sign up, and I will come back after I've signed up. And after signing up, I'm taken back to the OpenRouter home screen, and I'm going to click get API key, which is the key to unlocking OpenRouter for us with its free model availability. So I will name my API key free data analysis. You might want to set it for no expiration, but given I am publishing this in a video in a public forum, I want you to be able to see what this works like. I will do 1 day. And so I will create this API key, and then you'll want to copy it and ensure that you have it stored in a secure location on your computer. Now, with this key copied, we'll make our way back over here to the application, click the model icon, and then click Connect Provider. And you should see OpenRouter here. If not, you can search for it as well and click that. Enter our API key, which is a secure location to enter it. That way OpenRouter can access it to call the different models from OpenRouter, and clicking Submit. OpenRouter is now connected. Now, connecting OpenRouter, I would say, is a completely optional setup, but I wanted to introduce it here to give you more flexibility with OpenCode in case you wanted to try out different models other than the ones that are default provided. However, you don't have to do this step, and you can just work with the OpenCode models that exist. As you can see on my screen as well, I've been testing the different models, and if I work with the step 3.5 Flash model, it actually responds to me. Whereas if I try other models, let me choose one at random here, say Quen, then it will give me an error message saying it requires more credits. So it is limited. However, when you look at the free models for OpenRouter, you can select those and have the same capabilities that you would when utilizing the OpenCode Zen models here that are all free for you to utilize. And one important note here is you can actually look at all of the models that OpenRouter provides to you by clicking this Manage Models button underneath the model area there. And if I look, there's a lot more free models that are available in OpenRouter, where we have DeepSeek, Gemini, as well as Quen models here too, and Nemotron, which is NVIDIA's as well. So there is a lot of material that we can look at. And I'm going to enable this coder model since we will be working with code and I want something that specializes in it. And once I enable it, I should be able to now see it in here and then click hello and have it respond to me once it successfully does the attempt. So I've unfortunately been sitting here for a little bit waiting for this attempt to work, but I wanted to leave this in the video just to show you that at different points when you're working with free models, you might encounter difficulties like this, and it is okay. So you can switch back to the models that you know work, like Big Pickle here. And then if you encounter troubles with setting this up, oftentimes the best thing I find to do is to actually ask these models to help you out with setup. So if I wanted to ask the question, can you help me set up with OpenRouter and OpenCode? And I did not do that correctly with that message. And I'll type please here. Then that might be your best way to approach solving your problems with this. And like you'd see here, it gave me some instructions for how I can easily solve this problem, setting up these different API keys. And it may or may not give you the exact correct answer. And I find just saying, hey, I found this error. Can you help me resolve this? Or I'm seeing a different setup than what you explained to me. That might be helpful in order to have it actually assist you to get to the place that you want to go. And now, even considering these hiccups, I would call this section a success because if you followed along, you now have an AI agent set up in your terminal and in this application that will be your co-pilot for this rest of the video to actually complete some data analytics work. Now, the next brief part of this video is to set up and authenticate with your GitHub account. That way you can store code that you actually have written with one of these AI models. And think of GitHub, if you've never used it before, like a Google Drive for your code, where you can store and save everything that you build and write with these AI agents. And you write yourself if you do it. So the first step, what we'll do is sign up, and I will create my account here and come back to you after I've created it. Okay, now I've successfully created my GitHub account, and I'm going to first click this Create Repository button. There are some helpful videos here around Git. If you've never used them before, that might be worth watching as well. So we've created the repository as free data analysis with AI, and we'll click the final Create Repository button here. And now we have our repository created. Now, having repositories like this is going to be a key part of your workflow when analyzing data with AI, because really what they are is they're project folders, and you can have different subfolders underneath that, different analyses stored within one project folder or one repository like this, or you can create multiple different repositories that house different areas of different types of analyses. Now, if this is your first time installing Git and working with a GitHub repository, what we can do is go over here to OpenCode and click New Session. And then I am going to copy and paste this command in here that I have pre-written already. That is, can you help me install Git on my machine? And if needed, help me configure the GitHub CLI as well, which is the command line interface to authenticate to GitHub to do more advanced actions. And one thing I have in here that's important to note, that's always a good safety practice to keep in mind when working with AI agents, is to not directly paste any sensitive information into an agent, like a password or an API key. Having that saved as an environment variable or entering it in the interface like we did earlier with this video is definitely the best practice for doing that. That way you're not exposing that sensitive information. With that said, let's run this command. And as I do with all of my videos, I will include this command and all relevant resources in the repository. I create, as well as in the description of the video. Now we can see that it's given us some instructions for how to get a personal access token, which is an authentication token that GitHub gives you in order to actually publish files in your project and the work within the repository to the GitHub website and a corresponding GitHub repository URL. To do this, I will go to my settings here and we will click Developer Settings, Personal Access Token, Tokens Classic, Generate New Token, and I am going to do the Generate New Token Classic. For expiration, you can set this to whatever might be convenient to you. That could be no expiration. For my purposes, I'm just going to set this to tomorrow, and we will call this GitHub Demo. And then you can adjust the permissions here. Now, if you want it to be the most easy and convenient, you can click all of them, or really you can do some investigation and find out which ones you need. For my purposes, I'm going to do all of them just to make it a little bit easier, except for delete packages actually, and delete repo, as I want to save any delete actions for myself. And going through, clicking all of them, and we'll generate the token. And now we have the personal access token available. I will copy this, and if you're using it without expiration, you'll want to save it in a secure location. But now we'll take this to OpenCode to help us with the actual GitHub setup. Now, to install GitHub CLI and get Git configured, in the past, I normally would have entered a lot of commands in my terminal on my own and figured it out. But now we have AI and AI coding agents, so we can utilize AI to help us with this. So now to do this, I've typed out this command here that says, can you please do the work to install the GitHub CLI according to the needs of my computer to OpenCode? And I'm going to click send, and we'll let it run for a second and we'll come back. All right, it has successfully run and installed what we needed for GitHub. And now to go to the next step, if I go in the top right-hand corner, I can click this toggle terminal button, and I am going to run this command of GitHub auth login, click enter, and we will click enter to log into github.com, HTTPS, and paste an authentication token. And now we are set up, logged in as KC Labs Demo, which was the username I utilized in creating my GitHub account. Now, the last part of this is to make sure that when we're writing files to this GitHub repository, it's actually appearing as this user for KC Labs Demo. And I am going to ensure this by asking OpenCode this command: how do I configure my Git commands to KC Labs Demo user as well? And it's going to give me really two commands I expect to set my username as well as my user email for this account. And you can see here that it's asked me this question around my name and email. So I'm going to say type my own answer, and my email is this, and my username is this. So we will fire this off to OpenCode, and I'll come back once it's done. Okay, it's provided me with these two commands, and what I'll do in this terminal box I have below, I will simply copy and paste them, and now this should be configured, as we don't see any error messages within here. Everything that we've done with GitHub has been a success. So let's actually start building something in that repository and getting some analysis going. Now, for this next section, you're going to want to have two things prepared. Well, first, in the repository, you're going to want to copy the HTTPS for your GitHub repository here. And then secondly, you're going to want a location on your computer where you want to store this repository. I've created this projects folder underneath my base directory here, but really you can create it anywhere you'd like for how you want to organize this project and this repository on your computer. To get this repository installed inside of that location, you'll notice I have this command here pre-typed for OpenCode to say clone the repository locally. Clone meaning just make a copy of it on my computer and do it under this folder. And I have the folder path for my projects folder pasted in here. And the last portion of this is to create the initial README in Agents Markdown. I'll explain this where the README is essentially for human eyes, where it's meant to give you an indication of what the repository is about, what work is stored in this project, and that Agents Markdown is something that AI agents like OpenCode or any other AI agents you might use in the future or if you used in the past will actually read that automatically every time you open that repository. And it's a way to give it context so it understands what this project is about. The repository has now been cloned, as we can see all of these successful messages along with the initial agents and README files. So we'll go over to Windsurf now and begin working out of here. And what I will do is click Open Folder, Projects, click on the free data analysis with AI, open it, and now we see, yes, I trust the authors. We see our project in here with a README and an agents markdown file, as well as some other documents that GitHub and OpenCode created by default. Now again, to open OpenCode from within our repository here, all we need to do is open a terminal, type OpenCode, and we'll see it populate here. And now we have our AI assistant set up for free, our project set up for free, and now comes the most important part, connecting our AI to a real database for free. Now, this is the key step. Without this step, AI writes SQL but cannot execute it. And with this step, AI can both write the SQL and run it and actually gain access and knowledge about the tables you have in your database structure. The database that we're going to be utilizing for this tutorial is Google BigQuery. All you need to access this is a Google account. It doesn't require a credit card or any billing setup. And BigQuery, if you have not heard of it, I covered it in a previous video building out my YouTube analytics pipeline. It's basically a giant database in the cloud run by Google. You can store and query massive amounts of data using SQL for free. And the sandbox gives you 10 gigabytes of storage and 1 terabyte of free queries per month as of the time of this recording. And that's more than enough for learning and real analysis work. But one thing to know, in sandbox mode, when you don't have a billing account enabled, tables auto expire after 60 days. So if you later enable billing, that expiration goes away and your tables will stay as long as you want them, but you don't need to do that to successfully build out your skill set. Now, to access the BigQuery console, you'll need to create a project. And again, I will just create this as a default project name. And then we can find actual public data sets that BigQuery has available for anyone to utilize to analyze. To get access to these public data sets, you can click this button here to explore public data sets, and it'll take you to documentation for how you can do it. However, I've already pulled up the studio for BigQuery, and if I go into Explorer here, you might be default on Classic Explorer, go Add Data, and then at the bottom of this menu here to the left of my face is Public Data Sets. And we can see here that there are a variety, hundreds of public data sets that we can access. The one that we will be accessing for this tutorial is Stack Overflow, where if we click that, we can see that we have this Stack Overflow data that we can get. Moving back to our Windsurf window with OpenCode open in it, now the question is, how do we connect OpenCode to what we just showed within Google BigQuery? Well, good news for us is that there is the Google Cloud CLI, which contains access to BigQuery via the BigQuery CLI. And what the CLI stands for, it's a command line interface where essentially we can authenticate from our terminal. Rather, our AI agent can authenticate from our terminal, and it gets access to that data that is in that database stored in the cloud. Now, the easiest way to do this is to ask OpenCode, and we're using the Minimax model here. How do I install the Google Cloud CLI in Query BigQuery on my machine? And we can see OpenCode now has a slightly different interface inside of our terminal in Windsurf than it does when we had it open via the application. And it gave us these instructions back here for how to install it. And for me, being the lazy developer that I am, I actually asked it, can you please install it? And a lot of times this works really well for me, just having OpenCode or my other AI agent actually installing it, because it does it better than I would configuring my own computer. And I had one question of whether or not it was called the gcloud CLI. It confirmed that yes, it's called that. And I can see here that it is currently installing the Google Cloud SDK, which contains the gcloud CLI within it. So I have confidence that this is working correctly. Once we're able to authenticate, I will come back. Okay, great. Minimax came back, said it installed successfully, and it gave us this gcloud auth login command to authenticate. And what I'll do here is I will click this split terminal button and paste the command that it gave me into this other terminal to authenticate. And I will click enter here, and it goes over to my web browser to authenticate utilizing the Google Cloud SDK. Continue and allow, and it should say we are now authenticated with the Google Cloud CLI. With the authentication successful, now we want to test it in OpenCode and make sure that we have it marked in our agent's markdown file so it knows that it can use these command line tools for BigQuery as well as Google Cloud. And I've written this out into this prompt here saying we are authenticated. Can you please test it? And then also write in this agent's markdown file our persistent context across sessions, because every time you open a new session of OpenCode, think about it, you're wiping the slate clean unless you have things written down in here that will persist across sessions. We want to confirm that they work. So now we'll issue this query and wait for the confirmation to come back that everything is successful. It has come back successful, able to confirm its access to BigQuery and Google Cloud. And what we will now do is ask it to write a BigQuery command to do a count on that Stack Overflow dataset, and then save the query for me so we can actually see it in an analysis folder in this repository and an appropriate named subfolder for this analysis along with the results. The results have come back, and it was successful in finding that there are 23 million Stack Overflow questions. We see we have our analysis folder and subfolder with our results in query in here. And actually during the process, OpenCode was struggling to get the right syntax, but it kept thinking and trying different things. And I think this is a good example of where context can come in to help it in the future. So I've written this prompt here. Can you please write in the agent's markdown file the right context for querying BigQuery via the CLI so you do not struggle with this in the future? And generally, if you notice your AI struggling with a particular task that you've given it over and over again, this is a really good practice to have it write that into its memory for the right way to do it. That way it will run seamlessly the next time. And now it's finished this command, and we can see that it has built this BigQuery CLI cheat sheet section into its agent's markdown file here. And if I look over on the right-hand side of OpenCode inside my terminal here, I'll see a few different things. First, I see the context with how many tokens I've used, the percentage of my context window I've used, which your context window is really the window of information that you have in which the AI will perform well. So The best example of this is if you've ever had a long running chat with AI, it starts to forget things the longer the chat goes on. That's because it's overrun its context window. So it's starting to forget things at the beginning of its context window. So it's best to stay inside of your context window for the best results with AI. And then we also see there are modified files here with the Stack Overflow data analysis as well as the agents markdown. Now, it's nice that this knows how to use the CLI correctly now and that it ran a count star query, but we know that for data analysis, you need a lot more than just the capability to do a count star to successfully analyze data. I am going to take this to the next level and go into the plan mode here, where I asked it to install Python 3. I already have it installed, but just in case you don't, you can ask it, as well as the BigQuery client library for Python, and then explore that Stack Overflow public data set in BigQuery, asking it what tables and columns are relevant for analyzing how programming language choice relates to salary. And there's a really important note here that I actually changed to plan mode, where there are two different modes. If I click Shift and Tab, there's build mode and plan mode. What plan mode is before it runs any sort of action that is actually changing something on your computer or doing an analysis, it is going to build a plan and present you with that plan of action. And then ultimately you approve it before it takes that action. It's a really smart way to ensure that AI is going to do what you intend it to do. And if the plan it presents you isn't what you wanted, then you can give it feedback to have it alter it to ultimately arrive at the place for the plan that you want to execute. After a little bit of iteration, OpenCode has come back to us with a plan as well as a clarifying question. As far as the iteration goes, I just asked it to use BigQuery for Python when it presented me with an initial plan, and asked it again to present me with the full plan for doing this. So sometimes it takes some iteration to get the exact insight that you want. I've copy and pasted my response to the clarifying question that OpenCode had here, saying to proceed with reputation as a proxy as opposed to looking for salary data outside of this data set. We'll keep it simple for this demo. I also wanted to create a BigQuery table, having it have that write back capability into my database and have the work actually stored in the cloud. That way, it's easy for other people to query it, say if I was working in a shared environment. And additionally, just like we did with our other analysis, I wanted to create a appropriately named analysis subfolder and include any final SQL, Python scripts, and results file. So we'll click enter here. And again, this is something I covered in my previous Jira video a few months ago, but having a structure within your repository like this and having it written in your agent's markdown file, like every time I do an analysis, put it in a subfolder underneath this analysis folder, will be super helpful to streamlining this process of working with AI. So it asked me one more question around reputation, and I answered that, and I can see the alteration in the script here to have it greater than or equal to 100. So we're getting reputable sources. And now it's asking me, hey, can we move out of plan mode? So I did Shift Tab back to build mode and said, you are in build mode now. Now execute the plan. And this is the exciting part and the part where we get to sit back and relax a little bit, as now OpenCode will execute this analysis plan and come back to us with the results once it has finished it. And this is a part where you can enjoy your day a little bit or be amazed as you're watching it work. But you don't have to sit here and watch it go through everything. You can come back and ultimately review the results once it's done, which is exactly what we'll do here shortly. Okay, after a little bit, the plan has officially executed. It did find some things that I want to make sure are accounted for in my future analyses. I had it look at single tag languages, which was one round of iteration feedback once it came back to give me the results of the analysis. And now I've written out this additional feedback for here, where we can see all of our Python scripts, SQL scripts, and Markdown JSON files here, which it's a little confusing for a human to review, right? So firstly, I want to make sure that all of this data is correct and that we have proper quality checking on it. And then I want the results that were produced in these markdown files, in these result files, actually reproduced utilizing this single tag languages option that we approach this analysis with, this new logic. And then I want this format for organization of this analysis saved to our agents markdown file, where we have different subfolders that will ultimately organize this analysis in a better way. And it asked me another question here where it said, do you want me to filter for actual programming languages? And I'm going to say these results are fine with tags. And now after going into plan mode, it's giving me this final plan for the quality checking, reorganization, and the updates for the agents MD, as well as creating a combined README markdown file. So I only have to read one thing. And we'll say, go to build and say, yes, execute. We have arrived at the end of our analysis here, and there are just a couple things left to do. You can see that I have been talking with OpenCode a little bit, asking it to convert the results into a CSV instead of a JSON, and we can see our results up here. I asked it to delete the other markdown files after approving the plan, but ultimately it came back to me with this message saying that the quality checks passed, and the results are in BigQuery. Now, if this was a real data analysis, I would dive into those quality checks a little bit more to ensure that everything was exactly as I expected it to be, get familiar with the data myself in a very intimate way in order to make sure that the query that AI was writing was correct, or at least in a way that I would know whether it'd be right or wrong. And another key quality checking step I always do is I like to check the data myself. And so if we go into BigQuery here, and we can see I have my projects, datasets, analysis, and we can see that I have the language reputation single tag, language reputation by tag, the outputs of my analysis I did with OpenCode here. I will run this, and now we can see that the average reputation with the tag for the different languages is actually in the data, which is really impressive that we never touched BigQuery itself to run any SQL queries until now. That was all AI. So think about how much AI can do in terms of data analysis and how quickly it can do it. It is really incredible once you give it access to your tools like your databases so that it can run analyses like we just showed. And again, we did it all for free. Now, the last steps here is actually saving our work and getting it up into our GitHub repository. So I have this command here for please adding, commit, and pushing all this work. Essentially, this is a process to save all the work that we've done in our repository and creating a feature branch for it in a pull request for me to review. So while this does it, for those who aren't familiar with feature branch, pull requests, think you have your main branch, which is your source of truth, where all of your work is stored, and then you create a branch off of that, which is essentially a copy. You do your work within that branch, and then you have a pull request, which is a review request to confirm that you want your work that you just did in your feature branch to actually go back into your main branch. So hopefully that makes sense. Highly recommend those GitHub videos if it did not make sense. And one thing I forgot is if it's actually your first time putting work into a repository, you need to push it directly to the source of truth, the main branch, since nothing had previously existed there before. I did that, And I also made some additional changes to make this repository more useful to you all once you get access to it by looking in the link in the description below. I'm going to click enter on this, saying we push directly to main, and now go through that same process I just previously asked it. So we'll actually now get a pull request out of this that we can look at together. Now we have our pull request here. We can see my user is the committer, and we have these different commits here with the file changes, or the only one commit. And we can see all the different file changes that we did as a result of this. And I'm going to click merge request, confirm merge, and then delete the branch. So now when I go to the actual code in the top left-hand corner here, we can see that there is this one main branch here that I will use as my source of truth. And to make sure I stay clean, only having one main branch, I'm going to delete that other feature branch. And now I have my analysis files with the language reputation, Stack Overflow question count, and all of the different data in here, as well as documentation to help you get the most out of this repository, as this is now available to you for you to utilize and download and see how I did all of this and get the relevant documentation for setting up the agent's markdown and the README for you to review with key terms and glossary and other helpful items with this. We've now reached the end of our video, where I've put together this diagram here so you know what we did with utilizing OpenCode and BigQuery Sandbox, but that you also know there are so many other free AI tools that you can utilize to accomplish similar analyses, as well as free database tools that you can access to, where there is Aider, Olama, and you can also access Azure for free, MotherDuck, all these different options for how to store your data and how to analyze your data with AI for free. And this method that we applied in this video is applicable to all these other models, as well as all of these other databases. If you want the links to this information, I've included it all here within the repository README, where you can click, get information from these different websites of these different AI tools and database tools so that you can utilize them to increase your AI-enabled data analytics skill set. I hope you all really got a lot of value out of this video, especially if you're just starting out. This hopefully will be your launching point into a great career of having AI-enabled data analytics work for you. And with that, I want to say thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment if you found this valuable or any feedback you have. And as always, I will talk to you next time.